immortal words of the Fantastic Four's Ben Grimm, it's rabbit fighting time. Welcome to Rabbit Fighters, the podcast that dares to ask the question, hey, Brian, if I were to stand you up somewhere like, I don't know, just off the top of my head, the gates of hell, do you think you would back down?
No, I don't think so. We'll find out, I guess.
Back down.
Well, with that, I'm Joshua.
I'm Greg.
I'm Brian.
And we're Rabbit Fighters. As if that little intro wasn't enough to clue you, the esteemed audience, in, this week we'll be catching up on Full Moon Fever, Tom Petty's first solo album from way back in 1989. What was that, like 10 years, 15 years ago? So why this album in particular? I'm a little flabbergasted that we chose this. It's kind of an out of a left field choice. Why now of all times as well? So Full Moon Fever, it's a bit of a sleeper track, I think. The critical response, 8.1 out of 10 on Pitchfork's like retrospective. They didn't exist back in the late 80s, so they had to go back in time and do it. 8.0 out of 10 from NME. A 3.5 out of 5 from Rolling Stone, so not like fantastic, but not terrible either. But All Music, their review said there are no weak tracks, and it's a minor musical masterpiece.
What did I say in our chat? I said it's a near. I said it's a near masterpiece. I'm jumping the gun.
High praise.
I was mocked.
So the premise of Rabbit Fighters is that one of us has not, one or two of us has not experienced the item that we're talking about this week, and so this week, Brian is on deck with not having experienced Tom Petty's Full Moon Fever. Is that right?
It's true. I'm really excited to get this one going, mostly because it means I can stop listening to Tom Petty on repeat this week.
Come on, Brian. Come on.
We'll get into it. I have opinions. It's not going to go the way you think it's going to go, but yeah, I've heard most of this album. I've never owned it. This is ideal proof that we truly just pick random albums, because I probably would not have chosen to spend my week listening to Tom Petty, but now I'm in it. I'm ready.
So what's your history with this, Brian? Are you familiar with Tom Petty's like back catalog when he was with the Heartbreakers?
Yeah, of course. Me and T Petty are both from Florida, so
Gainesville, Florida, the Panhandle.
No, I mean, obviously, I think the only album I've ever owned is Damn the Torpedoes. I think, right? It's just one of those things, and I thought about this a lot. There's a small subsection of bands or artists that I put into this bucket of, yeah, I respect them as musicians. There's songs that I like, but I just will never go down the discography of these artists. And Tom Petty is one of them. Rolling Stones is another.
Steel Wheels.
Wow.
Check it out.
Eric Clapton. There's a whole Tom Petty's in there. There's a real obvious one where I was just like, I don't get it. You know, it's sort of like the Dave Matthews Band thing. I'm not gonna. A lot of these bands have albums that go on. Oh, the other one I was thinking of, the big one that popped that I forgot was Bruce Springsteen.
Oh, yeah. I'm with you on DMB, but some of these others, yeah.
I can appreciate Bruce Springsteen, but I have no interest in going and listening to his albums and his rarities and his live. I just don't care enough.
Well, damn, because that was going to be my suggestion for next week was Bruce Springsteen, but never mind.
Please don't. I can't. That's my experience. I feel like I know as much about Tom Petty as the average person. Maybe then add a little bit more.
Well, Greg, I think of the three of us, you were probably the biggest proponent for Tom Petty. So what's your experience? Like, were you a big fan of Tom Petty back in the day? Well, true, but were you like in the Tom Petty camp during the Heartbreakers era, and onward from that?
Guys, smoke a J together or something?
No. First of all, getting high is not my thing.
It wasn't insinuating that.
I know people that like love doing it, and they're always like, "Here, have some," and you're like, "I don't want any," and they keep offering it to you, and you're like,
stricken from the record.
I don't want. Why don't you smoke it?
This is a drug-free podcast.
Is it really a drug-free podcast? I didn't think that was a thing.
No, but we're afraid our employers will see this. So.
Oh yeah, I guess. I'm saying I didn't do it. People would always try to give it to me. I'd be like, "No, you You smoke it. You like it so much. You smoke it.
You're so cool, Greg.
I
People are
don't
always trying to
know.
give
Well,
you
no, it's
credits.
in college, They were like, hey, it's passing it around because I'm like 100 years old. So like people used to sit around and like talk to each other and stuff, and no one had a cell phone. But no, like I actually didn't like Tom Petty when I was younger. I thought he was just kind of a whiny clown. But then when this album came out, when Full Moon Fever came out, they played Run Down a Dream, and I was like, I don't like it, but I do. It's really freaking good, but I can't admit it. And then Free Fallin' came out, and I was like, I'm buying this stupid album. Damn it. And then I had to admit that I liked Tom Petty when this album came out because it was just an undeniable album. Like the half of it is freaking classic, and then the rest of it is interesting enough. And it was back in the day where I lived in a small town, and I didn't have access to all this music that you can look at today. So I would go to the store and I would just like buy every album from that person and listen to it over and over and over. And especially if I didn't like it at first, because you invested whatever, 10, 12, 15 bucks. You're like, I'm going to play this a few times and see if I like it.
Those are 80s dollars too.
Yeah. And sometimes some of my favorite albums are the ones I didn't like at first. And then I listened to them a bunch and I was like, all right, this is actually one of my favorites.
Then you waterboard yourself with Tom Petty to like it.
No, but Tom Petty for me is like Neil Young, Tom Waits, a bunch of other artists, dark beer, coffee, all the stuff that you don't like when you're younger and you get an acquired taste for it.
Well, and I remember we brought this up, and I'm assuming you have an interest in this album as well, or at least we're very surprised that I had not heard it, and you seem excited to talk about it. So, what is your experience?
I think the first like real Tom Petty thing I'd ever saw was that "Don't Come Around Here No More," like the Alice in Wonderland video. Yeah, which was awesome. That was such a cool, crazy, dark video.
Oh yeah, it's super weird.
That was like, yeah, for like a kid, like that being one of the first music videos that you glom onto. It was like a so that really like put him on the radar for me. So when and then I think the first like real memory I have of Full Moon Fever specifically was, do you remember that like that Fred Savage Nintendo movie, The Wizard?
You said Fred Savage and Nintendo movie in the same sentence. What is this? I've never heard this in my life.
If I'm remembering that right, I believe it was Fred Savage, and I believe it was called The Wizard. It was about the power glove. Anyway, there's this like, as an adult, like looking back on it, it was like pure product placement. Like David Geffen definitely helped with this movie.
Geffen was all over that technique.
Because there was just one scene where they're like in a barn or something, and there was like just a full poster of Full Moon Fever, Tom Petty, his big grinning face right there with the acoustic guitar, and that just like jumped out at me. And so my parents were split up, and so like twice a year I would go to my dad's place. My dad's like huge music head, like he had thousands of CDs, and I would just spend like just hours like looking through all these CDs, and he had Tom Petty Full Moon Fever, and that was like just one of the albums that I would just like play just a ton. So that's like really my only like connection to it, is just like fond memories from when I was a kid. But yeah, obviously this is the first time I've really sat down and listened to it since like maybe the mid 90s.
I've listened to it more recently. Yeah, I still listen to Tom Petty on a regular basis. What really cemented it for me, well, first of all, this one came out after Damn the Torpedoes, which had a bunch of hits on it. And then I had to admit that I like this album. And then the one that came out like a year later, also that Jeff Lynne produced, those two back to back were incredible albums. Like I love them. And then what really cemented it though was Wildflowers. That I will say is a freaking masterpiece. That's one of my favorite albums of all time is Wildflowers. So like, it wasn't on our list of stuff that like one person had heard and the other hadn't. So like I would have picked that one, but Wildflower is like top to bottom. It doesn't have like Zombie Zoo, like there's no crappy track like Zombie Zoo. I'll cast that in advance.
No,
like,
all music said no weak tracks, Greg. Come on, that includes.
No, I know. I don't agree with that. but except for Wildflower. Wildflowers is a freaking amazing album. I love that album.
I would agree with that. I remember I haven't listened to it recently, but I listened to it all the way through college, and I really, really loved
Yeah,
Wildflowers.
even the title track is so good. Yeah, I love it.
Totally. All right, so let's break it down. Brian's got some thoughts. I think
Brian hated it.
so. I think we never really talked about an album before. This is only our second episode. We're still feeling it out. But Full Moon Fever as an album, it is. I think I would argue it's a little heavy on the side A. As opposed to side B, but just for ease of like discussion, let's talk about side A first. So you've got Free Fallin', big hit. I Won't Back Down, huge hit. Love is a Long Road, A Face in the Crowd, and then Running Down a Dream. So side A, Brian, How to Hit You.
It's great. And this is what I was saying in our side chat, throughout the week. I was like, man, this album's heavily lopsided, which is fine. I thought more about the production side of these things. I mean, I like Jeff Lynne, right? I like
Yeah, me too.
I like Yellow.
I
I like and that sort of thing. But where I kind of don't really like it is when Greg had brought up Wildflower or whatever. I went and listened to that, and it only made it more obvious to me how Jeff Lynne influenced this album is when I go back and listen to it, because I really, really liked the stripped down version of Wildflower. And I think if I had started with that one, I'd be like, okay, this is great. In terms of like, I would probably be more apt to go down the Tom Petty album track. Just the intro to You Don't Know How It Feels with just the kick drum and the simplicity of that. I was like, this song is better than everything that's on Full Moon Fever. So just the vibe of just the kick and the snare and the everything is just like, I was like, okay,
Totally.
this would hook me. This would get me in. But, and not to say I don't care for the shimmery acoustic and the harmonies and stuff like that, but then when you pair it back on another album, like, oh, okay, I get that. Like, that to me is what I would like that. I think the lyrics are better, read more into that as like his divorce album and that sort of stuff. So
Wildflowers was produced by Rick Rubin.
yes,
yeah.
I know
Yeah.
that.
I know.
I had no idea.
You can't complain about if that's an EP. It's great. I mean, that's what's hard to like pick an album like this or any of these albums that are incredibly well known. Like, you can't really shit on them. They're good albums, right? But I mean, I see the brilliance in the first half of this. The second back half of this, I know we'll talk about it later, but it's pretty skippable in my mind. Like, as a non Tom Petty enthusiast, I would probably just not. I would just listen to the first half, and when he starts talking about flipping the tape over, I'd be like, "Oh, you mean completely find a new record?" That's what I would probably do.
Ouch.
Hey, I'm just not that into this, and so and that's fine.
I think we should start listening to other records.
I think you should see other people.
I think after 6 tracks we've had enough of this, and then let's move on.
I
Wrap
think
it up, Tom.
it just points out how important a producer is, right? Like, I feel like a producer is kind of like the cinematographer. It's like the unheralded to the average, person who listens to music or watches a movie. They think about the director, the actors, but this, the producer is like the cinematographer almost, or a director and a cinematographer combined, for an album. Like, they're so freaking important, even down to like the details. Like, they can screw up an album, they can overproduce like a really like natural artist and ruin a record, and they can also like bring out amazing stuff from someone who hasn't done it yet. And they can say stuff like, if they're trusted by someone who's already famous, screwing around with the lyrics to Free Fallin' can end up with the song Free Fallin', which he never would have had if Jeff Lynne wasn't there and if he didn't trust Jeff Lynne. So like, the producer is super important, and you can hear Jeff Lynne all over the 2 albums that he produces and the Traveling Wilburys album. I won't mention the second Traveling Wilburys album because it's not worth mentioning. It's just trash. Roy Orbison died, and they thought they'd make a tribute album to him or something, and it just stunk. But you can hear Jeff Lynne all over everything he works on. Sometimes good, sometimes bad. For me, I like his sound. I like the sound he brings. He's got kind of like a birdsy type sound that he brings out of people, and some of these songs sound like bird songs. Like, Feel a Whole Lot Better, the first song on side 2.
That's a cover, isn't it?
I don't know. The writer's Gene Clark, but I don't know whose it is.
Yeah, it's a Birds cover. Yeah.
Is it a Birds cover? Okay,
Yeah.
yeah, okay. Well, there you go. That's why it sounds like a bird song, but a lot of the stuff does too. Like,
But I think I read Tom Petty was a huge Birds fan growing up,
yeah,
and so this album was kind of channeling that.
You know, well, I think that's kind of as I was listening to that and digging in a little bit on the Birds cover, and it got me thinking of a question. I was trying to think of other covers that are better than the original. I feel like that's how a cover should be done. Like you should be striving to make it different than the original. And the first one that comes to mind is like, like Jeff Buckley doing, Hallelujah or something. Where you're like, this is better than the original, but
well, different. Yeah, it doesn't have to be better. Yeah,
or something like that. Yeah. And I was like, wow, this bird song and this song, he just must be a big fan. Like, this is nothing.
he just wanted to do a bird song. Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to throw this cover in there.
Totally. I feel the same way about covers too, but it's like his version of it is good. This is a product of listening to albums again and again. Like when I would get them, you invested in the album. It's on a little piece of plastic. You can flip it over and listen to it again. And like I would sit down and like study an album, and I have more appreciation for this album because of that. If I just listen on Spotify once, I'd be like, okay, skippable. But like, I think You're So Bad. I have a lot of affection for You're So Bad.
Yeah, actually, really, I listened to that track the most in the over this past week. It's just such a really well written song, really catchy. There's like the harmonies that are running through it. I think the first time I listened to it during this past week, I got a little tingly, like listening to that song. It was surprising. So I think that's probably the high point of the entire album for me is You're So Bad. The rest of it's kind of a little bit of a letdown, like especially compared to like how heavy the first side hits, which I don't know how they make those decisions for placing the order of the songs, but this feels like an album that could have done with remixing a little bit, like placing the songs in a different order. It would have benefited from that. Zombie Zoo, probably not the best closer.
Zombie Zoo is trash. I hate Zombie Zoo. Actually, Depending on You is like one of those songs that should be great. Like it has everything going for it, but I never opt to listen to it. I'm not like, depending on you. But like, I don't really like go for that song. The Apartment song, I really do like. I really like All Right for Now as a very underrated little tune. It's just a beautiful
that one's good.
little.
I like that one as well.
Yeah,
that's like the bedtime lullaby one, baby. Right? I thought it's pretty schmaltzy, but it's all right.
No, I don't think it's schmaltzy. I mean, I feel like it's schmaltzy if singing the bedtime song to someone you love is schmaltzy. Then
yeah, but he's not singing it to someone he loves. He's singing it to the record.
What? Every song it's ever recorded is singing to a record. You never have the person in front of you.
Therefore, it's schmaltzy.
It would make breakup albums pretty awkward. You just try to bring your ex into the studio and plunk her down in front of the mic.
I thought it was heavy-handed. Don't furrow your brow. Like, that's such a weird turn of phrase.
No, I love that song. And then A Mind with a Heart of Its Own,
Yeah.
And Zombie Zoo is trash.
Zombie Zoo, I was actually listening to that this morning after dropping my kids off on the walk back home. And it's just like, I'd never like really, really listened to that song before. And it just seems like the most like old man kids get off my lawn sort of song about these kids today and the way they dress. Like, who needs them? Go and dancing at the Zombie Zoo.
Zombie Zoo is the thudding turd that ends the album that nobody likes. Brian, what did he say? What did Petty say about Zombie Zoo? You looked it up.
Yeah, I found a quote from Tom Petty. They told Rolling Stone 2017. I do not understand how that Zombie Zoo got on the record when I had better stuff that didn't get on the record. What frame of mind produced that? I don't understand, because normally I would have thrown that away. God knows we've thrown away far better. That was nearly a perfect album until the very
Holy
end.
shit, is that real?
Yeah.
That's insane.
That's what I
Oh,
feel
sorry,
about it.
I missed the beginning of that sentence. I hate Zombie Zoo. He told her all the time.
It's just tell us how you really feel about your own work.
I don't know. Maybe things
That's
were
so
different
funny.
or in the late '80s, but I mean, how can you sit through so many like meetings with what David Geffen records or whatever, and like it'd be unknown to you that that's the last track on your record
Oh, I mean, I think he's saying like I was on drugs or something. It just sounded like he was like we didn't really, think something was going on. Well, I don't know how it ended up there, but something happened that allowed it to be on there, and it's probably
That's just crazy talk. That's I mean, it explains it, but
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. It's a I even when I listened to this album the first bunch of times, I was never like, you know what, this is actually a pretty good song. I was like, this is trash.
No amount of re-listens could get you to warm up to Zombie Zoo.
No, no, no. It's not a good song. I don't love A Mind with a Heart of Its Own either, the one right before it. But I will point out something that people in the modern age probably don't realize if they actually listen to albums, is if you listen to albums on a streaming platform, especially the older ones, you'll see like the first two tracks are great, and then the second, third, and fourth, maybe there's a one good one out of 2 through 5 or 6, and then there's always this like track 6 or track 7 is always like, hey, this is another really good one, and it's because of sides. It's because records and tapes had sides, and so you wanted to kick off the second side with another hit. So when someone flipped the thing over, they would suddenly get another hit and be like, oh, well, I'm going to listen to this side now, I guess, instead of losing interest. And I guess it's interesting that they picked Feel a Whole Lot Better on this one for like the flip side, the beginning of side 2.
I think You're So Bad was the first track on side 2.
You're So Bad? Okay. Yeah, I'm on like Wikipedia, and it has Feel a Whole Lot Better as the first.
Oh no,
one
then I guess I'm wrong.
Side 2.
Then, yeah, I guess that would make sense because it does the Running Down a Dream, which is a really super fucking catchy tune. And then it goes into his little spiel about flipping the record over, unless you're on compact disc. And I think I read that he recorded them on someone's farm, like George Harrison's farm or something.
Yeah, I was trying to think, a measure of as you go through albums and we talk about these type of things, like would a successful listen to be if I came away from it saying, you know what, I'm going to go further. I'm going to go listen to more Tom Petty. I'm not. But if that were the case, like, I hope to one day walk away from one of these albums going like, holy shit. I mean, because there have been bands that I either thought I didn't like or whatever. And to your point, Greg, listened to them many, multiple times and decided to put on a weird album and be like, oh shit, like this is great, and you fall in love with the band. But I don't think that's for me on this, mostly because I mean I know a lot of this stuff. I mean, there's bands that I don't know a lot about, and then I've gotten into them. But I mean, he's got so many hits. I mean, he's a fantastic songwriter, and everyone knows who he is. So it's hard to avoid Tom Petty. I mean, and all the hits that he's had. So I'm like, it's not like I'm unfamiliar with him, but I don't know if I'd go down exploring some more of his albums after this. It's kind of like, plus, especially when artists like this have extensive discographies, like Bob Dylan.
Dylan is daunting, man. There's too much
huge,
Dylan.
And you're just
too
like,
much.
It's too much, and and a lot of it sounds the same, and you just have to really be in love with the artist to want to get into that space, and
especially the last like 30 years where he just sounds like an incomprehensible like Uncle Fester like drug addict. Where you're like, oh my god, man!
I saw him in early 2000s or something like that, because I was like, I gotta see Bob Dylan before he.
Gotta see Bob Dylan.
I gotta see him before he dies, which sounds sad, but that was 25 years ago, and I was like, I gotta see. Yeah, it's like you want to see some of the classics. And it's never turned out well. It was an awful.
Why
show.
won't you die?
I couldn't understand anything he was saying, and
he's still chugging. I think Bob Dylan was actually the first concert I went to, and it was like in early high school in
Really?
Dothan, Alabama, of all places.
Dothan.
Yeah, like tucked away in the southeast corner of Alabama. Bob Dylan was touring, and for some reason he was playing in Dothan, and so me and some friends, not any of us really being big big Bob Dylan fans or anything like that, we're like, oh, this might be our only shot to ever see Bob Dylan. So let's go
Yeah.
see it. So.
Well, that's kind of how I felt. It's like see him out of respect for I got to see him. It's one of those type of things, and I'm glad I did, but it wasn't good. There's been a lot of artists in my life that I've seen like that on a whim of like the Rolling Stones or another one. I was like, this is terrible.
I saw the Stones. Actually, I saw the Stones last fall at a much COVID delayed show where I bought tickets in 2019, I think, where I was like, I will see the Stones because, I don't know, they're the Stones. I'm not a big giant Stones fan. And they delayed it and then kind of canceled it. And then out of nowhere, like 2 years later, they were like, the show is on in a week. And I was like, what? Like, oh yeah, it's like finding a 20 in your pocket and you're like, how did that get there? So, and like Charlie Watts had died in the interim. It was like, 3/4 of the band now. It's super weird.
Who did they have an opener?
It was Tom Petty.
Yeah. Nope. I don't know who the opener is. The opener is one of those people who's like, a blues guy, like a rockin' blues guy, in his band. And, God bless him. He's good at playing music, but it's like you could be at any street fair, any wedding. Somehow you're playing in front of the Rolling Stones because I don't know, the manager or the bouncer or something. But it's like Bobby Bingo and his blasting blues band. It's just like
I asked because I saw him in Miami and Shaggy opened up.
Shaggy opened up for the Rolling Stones.
Yeah, I feel like I remember it was like a last minute thing and they were in Miami. Like, who's in Miami? Shaggy's here. It's like
Shawty, you're my angel. Shawty.
I should dig up who was supposed to. I could have sworn there was somebody else that was supposed to open for him, and they couldn't. I don't know whatever happened. Shaggy. I think I left early. I think I left the concert early.
You're like the Rolling Stones and Shaggy. It's like the Rolling Stones and Sugar Ray. What?
Exactly. Why? I was just like, I drove all the way down here for this shit. Like,
and you're in Miami.
And I had shitty seats.
You can tell they're old. They don't want to get shown up by anybody, right? Like you get the rock and blues guy. They're just like, look, just put someone out there that won't show us up, and then we can come on late and be mediocre and still impress everyone. Like Mick Jagger could still do flips and stuff. I was like, hey, look at he's flexible, They're
still touring. Are they still touring?
Yes, they are.
Inject some stem cells and gets to work.
They're gonna go down to the last member.
I that's funny in my head. I was going on my like bucket list band tour of seeing these people, and none of them have died. Not that I'm wishing them to die. It's like I got to see them before they stop, and then they're still going.
Bob had loads of time.
Yeah, I know. I could have. Santana was another one.
Coldplay. I got to see Coldplay before Chris Martin goes.
Well, I like how we have just completely strayed from talking about.
I think that's fine. I mean,
It's fine.
We're just tired of Tom Petty.
No, I love Petty, man. Like I never got to see him live because the shows were always like $500. Toward the end
for one ticket.
For one ticket, and I was like not financially liquid at the time.
You know what it sounds like to me, Greg? It sounds to me like you backed down.
I won't back down unless I'm broke, and then I will totally back down.
Tom Petty, he would have marched right up to that gate, and he would have figured out a way.
Stand right up to the gates of Scalper, and then I'll totally back down.
I think it's difficult to try to analyze something like this album because something that's so well known and so well, it's a classic. It's like how do you review something? I feel like your opinion falls in the space of like, did I like it or didn't I like it? Because clearly there's great songs on this album, so it's not like you can have a strong opinion or be like,
yeah, and I think that's going to be a problem that we run into often with especially these older things that there is some amount of nostalgia or personal history that's tied up in it, inevitably. And for anyone who's actually like listening to this, it's probably going to be the case for them as well that they may their opinions may diverge wildly from ours based on like where they were when they heard it, or if they've never heard of Tom Petty, which I'm sure is possible with the young kids today. But yeah, I think where I'm at with it is I don't know. I guess I got tired of listening to Tom Petty at the end of the week. If I'm truthful, like I found my ears wandering to other bands, needing a little something to change the taste palette of my ears every now and again. I did try to I went and I listened to Damn the Torpedoes, which I don't think I'd ever listened to the whole thing back to back. I didn't listen to Wildflowers. I probably should have listened to Wildflowers, but I listened to the soundtrack to She's the One.
She's the One, yeah.
Which has some pretty good songs on it, honestly.
It does. There's good songs.
Yeah, like Walls. Like that's a jam. Yeah. And I remember liking that when it first came out in the 90s. I think I may have even purchased that CD at one point. But yeah, truth be told, I probably won't listen to Full Moon Fever again for a very long time.
You won't need to because the radio will play these songs ad nauseum like they have for the past 30 years.
I know, it's true. The grocery store, you'll be picking out yogurt and they'll be playing Won't Back Down or Free Fallin'. I gotta say about Petty, he's one of those people that like transcended his background, because like he grew up in Gainesville, Florida. He grew up in the Panhandle. I've been to the Panhandle, man. There's a lot of like, it's like there's a lot of ways you can go. The way he turned out, he's just one of those like, gems of the region. You know what I mean? Like he's just a strange dude who has always been for equality. American Girl is credited as being the first rock song that uses a woman's perspective, like basically like seen through the eyes of a female character, which is incredible to me. Like I think it's the first male rock song that uses the perspective of a woman. Maybe even first any rock song, because like women didn't get to play rock back then. They just like weren't allowed. But I don't know. I salute people that transcend the small-minded people from the places they grew up in and became interesting people.
I think sort of similarly, like another like sort of anecdote that I had read about Tom Petty that I think gives you kind of like a window and like the decency of him was the whole Sam Smith "Stay With Me" debacle where he got it's the same song as "Won't Back Down." It's almost the exact same song. And he
first time I heard it.
Yeah, he could have gone like the hardline route, but he was, these things happen. We'll settle it. We do need to make sure that we get paid for it appropriately, and I think they got like 12% royalties or something like that in the end. And him and Jeff Lynne got. I think it was a certificate of honor or something for their participation at the Grammys. They didn't get a Grammy
from the Sam Smith Society,
but the Grammy recognized them for
as an
for
honorary Sam Smith. Dude, we present you with the 3rd annual honorary Sam Smith Award.
That's such a goofy award, like a participation trophy for actually writing a song. But by all accounts, Tom Petty, like his whole attitude towards the thing was like, I've been in the industry a long time, and these things happen. Or I'm sure even like deep down though, he's like, no, you totally ripped off my song, but I'm not going to be a dick about it. So.
I think people do that sometimes without realizing, especially if they're musicians. and they've been around music their whole life, and they've just like soaked in all this music, and it's just so much unconscious stuff in their heads.
All right, well, Brian, this is your baby that you hadn't taken care of.
Wow.
Is that a thing?
No, I was trying to shoehorn that in there. That this is your album that you didn't listen to. So, how would you rate it? End of the day, whatever scale you find most appropriate. Tom Petty's Full Moon Fever. Is it a refugee or is it a don't come around here no more for Brian?
Yeah, this was tough for me. I just because I wanted to dig in, but I like to you, I found myself kind of wandering away from it a bit. And I do tend to have a group of musicians, artists that classic rock radio or has just sort of killed in my head, where it's like I've heard this song 1,000 times, like, and it makes it very difficult for me to separate myself from being like Free Fallin', which clearly is a great song, to me being like I've heard the song 1,000 times and I can't listen to it anymore, and that kind of thing. So I really have to kind of dig down and be like, I'm going to really try to get into, listen to this. So, but I mean, it's hard to argue that the first half of this album is great. I mean, and in turn, the second half is kind of just for me. But I feel like I've heard his hits are enough for me. If that's a clip, I can. If that's a succinct answer, is like, for me and Tom Petty, the greatest hits album is fine. Granted, Wildflower, I may go back and give that another listen, just because I kind of want to hear that a bit more. That's more of the style that I would probably be interested in. But if I had to give it a out of 10, for me, I think if you tightened up the side B or something, or had like even just a mix, a different track mix, I think it needs one of the hits from side A on side B to even it out a little bit for me. Because I totally 100% would walk away from this album on the side A. I'd probably be like, oh, let's go something else. So I think this puts it squarely in like the 7s range, 7 out of 10 for me. Because I mean, obviously the hits are fantastic. They're great.
What's the best closing song here? Like if you had to take your pick and move it to the end, to anchor it, to bring it home.
That's a good question.
I feel like it'd be Running Down a Dream for me.
I was going to say maybe Running Down a Dream, but
throw that at the end, because that ends strong.
Oh, you got to start with that. You got to start with that. I mean, I'd end with All Right for Now, actually. Honestly, I'd give it a little coda at the end. And I probably would drop A Mind with a Heart of Its Own and Zombie Zoo and make it a 10-track album and end it with All Right for Now. I just do a clean cut off the last two, end it with All Right for Now. I kind of like when albums end with a little quiet little coda sometimes like that.
Kind of like a little lullaby out kind of.
Yeah,
I could see that. So yeah, I felt like, I guess to wrap up my point, I kind of wish I had stronger opinions on this one. Like, I feel like there will be albums where I have a very strong, passionate opinion. This sort of falls squarely in my genre of just like, it sounds a lot like a lot of other things and songs I've heard a lot. So it's hard for me just to, I think, get into it. And yeah, I mean, B minus my head. I feel like C plus. I feel like C plus is just too low. I mean, I feel like if you write having even just 3 great songs for any other artist on one album would be amazing. So it's just a testament to how great of an artist he is that you're like, well, having this, any other artist puts out these type of hits on one record, you're like, this thing is the fucking A. So.
I feel like if any band had side A as all the hits in their career, they'd still be like playing.
Yeah.
People would still have them come and play 40, 50 years later or whatever, because you got those 5 songs are more than most people have in a career, if they have any.
Yeah, it's a testament of a long career and great albums where you're like we're even picking apart this one to even be like, well,
yeah,
like anybody other band would be like, this would be the greatest album they've ever put out.
I feel like the same thing is true of Neil Young. Like Neil Young put out Decade like forever ago, like that's 40 years ago or something, and it was like a double album packed with more songs than any band will ever come up with in a career that are that good. And then he had like another 45-year career after that where like Some of it was trash, some of it was great, but he stayed interesting, and he kept experimenting, and he still is. But like the material on Decade alone is like would cement you as a Hall of Fame artist, and then he added all this extra stuff to it. Petty's the same way. Like, even if he stopped making music in the end of the 70s, he'd be in the Hall of Fame, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And Highway Companion was one of his later albums. It's still a great album. Like, I'd give this an A minus. I love this record. And again, this is like when you watch a movie as a kid and you have a certain affinity for it that you might not have had if you heard it, if you saw it for the first time as an adult. I don't know. I listened to this when I had a selection of albums that I owned, and it was one of the ones that I would pick up and put in and listen to on a pretty regular basis. So most of these tracks are like old friends, and then there's your your drunken old friend who keeps showing up at your house, and you're like, we were never that close with Zombie Zoo. but most of the rest of them, you're like, yeah, come on in, let's have a drink, let's talk about the old days.
Yeah, this is a tough call. I mean, yeah, the nostalgic side of me wants to give it a higher score, but I also don't feel like I could recommend it to anyone who hasn't heard it and be like, oh, you got to listen to Full Moon Fever. So I think end of the day, I think the nostalgia side wins out enough that it's a B minus, maybe a solid B, right in the middle there. If this had been his best album, I don't know where I'm going with that. Well, I think Wildflowers is a superior album, but
Yeah, for sure.
yeah, like in comparison, so that maybe takes it down a little bit. But I like your idea, Greg, of cutting off the last two songs there. I think that would actually make it way more in the A category.
Yeah.
Zombie Zoo is that's a tough pill to swallow.
It's so bad. Yep. And I think this is part of the problem of being famous when you make stuff, is that like people in power, because everyone's always like, the suits made me cut these scenes out of the movie, the suits made me drop these songs off the album. And like sometimes they're right, you know what I mean? Sometimes like you'll see the director's cut of a movie and be like, no, all these scenes that you put back in stink, the suits were right. At this one, I think you get to a point where people are like, whatever you say, Mr. Petty. Even like the head of Arista Records or whatever is like, whatever you say, Zombie Zoo, we love it,
I feel like maybe it would benefit from better marketing. Maybe, there's not enough good Halloween songs out there. Like maybe Zombie Zoo and a cover of the Monster Mash. That Tom Petty could have done that. That would have sold millions.
Coincidentally, we started this off with just a random pick as like, oh, how are we gonna pick this? But it kind of, interestingly enough, he died 5 years ago to the day yesterday.
No way.
Yeah,
oh, wow.
October 2nd, 2017.
Wow. I was sad, man. And like, it's funny because like, my son was a lot younger when he died.
Sorry,
and like,
correction.
yeah. I think he died,
2017.
Like 2016, 2017. Yeah. But my son was always like weirdly into Tom Petty. Like I would play Tom Petty songs and like he would just like lock in on him and be like, who is this? This is good. And then he'd be like, is that Tom Petty? And when Tom Petty died, he was like really sad. And like we were listening to a Petty song driving in the car, and he was like, Tom Petty is in heaven. We're like, oh my God, man, he's taking this harder than I am. But it gives me an extra little bump in the heart for Tom Petty. And my son has always been really into him.
No, son, he's cool. Dancing in the Zombie Zoo.
No.
All right.
I don't want to be remembered that way, guys.
Well, I feel like this is a pretty good segue to end this on.
Sounds like it.
All right.
Yeah.
We got a couple B. Wait, so I'm just curious. So I landed B minus, Joshua B minus, Greg was. What'd you give it? A
A-.
minus.
I gave it A-.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let the record show.
It should be
That.
it's just going in your permanent record.
All right, for now. We're depending on you to end this episode.
All right, gents. Well, let's. You know what? As Joshua says, let's do it again next week.
Dance down at the sound of zoo.